Sure.
Good morning. Thank you for being here. We have some veterans of the Drang Valley. This is the 50-year reunion of the Vietnam War and the commemoration of the very first battle that kind of set the tone for the war in Drang Valley. We'd like to go to the veterans of the Drang Valley. They're in D.C. at their annual reunion. Can you please introduce yourselves, gentlemen?
I'm Colonel Bruce Crandall. I was the commander of the A Company of the 229th of the helicopters for supporting the 1st, the 7th, and 2nd of the 7th in the battle.
I'm Joe Galloway. I was combat correspondent for United Press International, present at the Battle of Landing Zone X-Ray with the 1st of the 7th Cavalry.
My name is Edward Times. I was in Company B, 17 Mortar Platoon, rifleman, whatever General Moore called on us to do.
Gentlemen, once again, thank you for being here 100%. Thank you for your service. We're going to go introduce over to Fort Hood with 17 Cav. We have some soldiers in the room that are eager to ask you some questions. They're in their conference room that's named LZ X-Ray. We'd like to go ahead and give Major Jeremy Williams the opportunity to introduce himself and say a few words.
Sounds good.
Hey, good morning, gentlemen. Major Jeremy Williams, Squadron XO. What we've got here is 5 soldiers from the Color Guard from last April's reunion in North Carolina. And we also have troopers from each of the other 5 troops in the squadron prepared with questions to ask you, gentlemen.
Troops from Fort Hood, thank you for being here. Absolutely 100%. Thank you for taking time out of your Saturday morning to spend some time with these veterans and get this opportunity. Are there any questions in the crowd?
Yes, Specialist Swire, why don't you go ahead with the first question?
How is the camaraderie between the soldiers?
So the question was, how was the camaraderie?
Yes.
Are you talking about how was the camaraderie here now or when we were in Vietnam?
When you guys were in Vietnam.
In Vietnam.
Oh, it was great once you figured out who was shooting at you and who you were shooting at. It was once they understood we were coming with the helicopters to provide as much support as we could. We became pretty good friends. More even bought a round of beer.
Joe, being from the outside, you were a correspondent there on the ground. How long did you kind of feel? How long did it take you to kind of feel the brotherhood?
It didn't take long at all. Once the bad guys started trying to kill me, I knew whose side I was on.
That generally does it.
It tends to do.
Let's see if we got some questions from Twitter and Facebook and see if we can't get some of those going on here.
I didn't hear what
He's got some other questions they're gonna
from Facebook.
Yeah.
Twitter and
Facebook.
So here's a question. Thank you. I have a question. My father, Lieutenant Colonel retired William Hadaway, deceased May 2014, participated in the Battle of Ia Drang as a Huey gunship pilot during his tenure as commander of Delta Company of the 227th AHB. Am I correct in understanding that Delta Company of the 227th was the only gunship company in their battalion, and all the other helicopters in the companies Alpha, Bravo, and Charlie were slicks?
That's correct, and that was true in the 229th and the 227th. And the gunships were both Delta Company, and the rest of the aircraft were slicks. So there were C models, H models, finally D models, and then H models. The C models were the gunships.
And what was it like being in one of those, flying over the Drang Valley, kind of seeing those things go on?
Well, What was it like flying over it in a slick? Or?
What was it like?
What was it like just being up in the air and those birds?
Well, you didn't get up very far. So all you saw was the very top of the trees, and the gunships were flying my flank, and they would run before we had any infantry on the ground. Once the infantry got on the ground, the gunships didn't do any shooting for me. They would do some fire for the infantry on the ground if they were called upon. But most of the support was prior to the infantry getting on the ground. Once the infantry got on the ground, we couldn't use the M60s that were in the doors, but later in the war, because you don't know where the infantry is, and you can't shoot up their backside.
Yeah.
What? Oh, for my flying in, I was in a B-17 mortar platoon, and General Moore, or Colonel Moore, he wanted some firepower on the ground right with him as we first went into the Ia Drang. We were the first going in, so like I was in a helicopter behind him. When we first came on in, it was kind of quiet, but things started getting live real quick. But the battle got started around 10:30 or 11 in the morning, and it was like kind of mass confusion as the infantry got on the ground. Everybody was going every which way, and you know, trying to get directions of what's going on, and the way the lost platoon got separated from us, I'm gonna cut it. One guy jumped up and took off running, and the lieutenant of the platoon took the platoon behind that guy, trying to catch him and, you know, have a prisoner to find out what's going on out there. So this is the way things started happening.
Yep. So that happened at 12:15 in the creek bed contact.
Yeah.
Let's go over to 17 and see what kind of questions we have going on over there.
Ross? Yes. Did you know anything about Ia Drang prior to going through mission, or if so, what were your thoughts before actually going on mission or getting mission details about what you would be doing?
No, we did the recon at about 6 o'clock in the morning. I flew out of Pleiku to pick up Hal and his staff, and Ed Freeman was flying the second ship. We flew over to the border almost, Cambodia, and turned north, went up to Duco, and we were picking landing zones, and we didn't know which one we would do at all until we got up to Duco, and Hal Moore looked at and with his staff, and I looked at it as to how many helicopters we could get in, and X-Ray was the largest, and so we flew back and looked at it again, and then we went back to get with the infantry and get my aircraft out there to pick them up. So we had never looked at that area. The idea was that we were going to try to keep the VC and the people who had been attacking the special forces camps from getting out of the country. We were rather surprised to find out there were several thousand sitting up on the Chupons waiting for us.
I have a question for Joe Galloway. Being in the military, being a reporter for the military and shooting video and stuff, sometimes I have problems getting on a bird to go shoot some footage or get some coverage. How did you end up on that bird in that valley?
Well, I'd been trying all day. I first I got on a helicopter when they were loading a company at the tea plantation, and I think it was probably B Company, and I found a empty seat in a Huey, and I got in it. And then an officer came along with a medic. And he looked in that, he was looking in all the helicopters for a place for the medic, and he looked in mine and said, "Who the hell are you?" And I just got out, and they put the medic in my seat. And I ended up, I tried to get in flying with Colonel Tim Brown, the brigade commander. And Colonel Moore waved his boss off. He told him, "You come in here with that Huey with all those, that command chopper with all those antenna, you're going to have to walk home because they'll shoot that thing to pieces." And so the colonel dropped me at the fire base where the artillery were shooting support for the fight. And I had the advantage of having marched with the battalion 3 days before. And I recognized Colonel Moore's S3, Captain Matt Dillon, who was rushing by, and I grabbed him and I said, "Matt, I need a ride in there." And he said, "Well, I'm going in as soon as it's dark with 2 Hueys full of ammo." And I said, "I want to go." And he said, "Well, I can't say yes. It's up to the old man." So we went over to the radio tent, and he radioed Colonel Moore, and I could hear the fighting going on through the handset of that Prick 25. It was noisy out there. And he reported to Colonel Moore when he was coming and what he was bringing, and then he said, "That reporter Galloway is here, and he wants to come in with me." And I listened pretty close to Colonel Moore's response, and it was, "If he's crazy enough to want to come in here and you got room, bring him." And then all I had to do was hide out from the 5 other reporters who were in that fire base until it got near dark, and they flew back to Pleiku for a nice bunk and a warm shower and a hot meal. And I got a ride into the pages of history.
That sounds like one hell of a ride.
It was.
That load, that was not Colonel Moore's aircraft. It was bringing the ammo in, and that Joe got to ride in on. That was my aircraft. That we were still carrying ammo in and wounded out, and we ended up carrying his staff in because he didn't want his Charlie shot up either.
And now your buddy's thick and thin, thick as thieves, huh?
Yeah, well, yeah, I reckon so. Crandall's been trying to get me to pay him for flying me in there and flying me out, and I'm willing to pay for the flight out, but not the damn flight in.
I'm willing to accept money for the flight out. The way he pays is in lines of print. That's not such a good thing for me.
I had no proofs.
Let's go to social media and see if we can't get another question from Twitter or Facebook. All right. Says, "Thank you. I have a question."
That's the same one.
That's the same question we already answered.
Okay. Let's go over to 17 and see if they have any more questions in the crowd. How about how's it feeling out there, 17? Listen to these gentlemen tell their stories of 50 years ago. Anybody?
Flying into missions, like what was going through your head at the time?
Can you?
The question came in broke.
Broken. Ask again.
Ask again.
Hey, sir, what was going through your mind once you started flying into missions? Like, what was I think, what was your biggest fear in the ultimate?
I think when you get in situations like that, your fear level goes out the window. You end up having a responsibility for the people on the ground, and you have the only worry that I had was that I would screw up and have somebody get killed because of one of my mistakes. But when I'm supporting that infantry, and once we understood how many wounded there were and how much ammo, and I was listening on their radio, so I heard the panic that was going on with some of the people out on the line, and you couldn't stop going. I'm a real advocate today of changing the creed, I'll never leave a brother behind, to being I'll never leave a living brother behind, because once in a while we end up going in after dead bodies, and it risk my crews and myself, and I really am offended by that. I don't want to have to lose living people for dead bodies. So if you all have any influence on something like that, why, don't call the helicopters in for dead bodies until everything's quiet.
Yeah. Sergeant Horn, how'd you get over the initial fear of going in there?
How'd you get over it?
I mean, when you get that fear, what made you push through it?
Well, you have to. It's the idea. You know there's 450 people on the ground. I put them in there, and there's no way in hell I'm going to leave them without the ability to fight. And that's where 50 years ago we established the validity of the aeromobile concept. Up to there, it was just a concept, and then it became a fact. Almost every major country that has a military has some aeromobile type of capability. And 50 years ago, we developed it, started it, and we even used Chinooks, which are now being used in Afghanistan, to put the fire base in. So it's been 50 years of continuing use of the airmobile concept and the helicopter infantry team, and it's a great team.
And Mr. Times?
Yeah. What do you want to say?
What did you do when pushing through that initial fear on the ground? What did you reach to? What got you through it? What made you push through the initial fear?
Well, I'm gonna say being the first on the ground, Bruce didn't say how long it took him to go pick somebody else up and come back. This was like a 30 to 40-minute round trip for him. And when we first got on the ground, or however long it was, Bruce, when we first got on the ground, we were on the ground by ourselves until Bruce got back. And, you know, he made several trips, you know, trying to get him in until, you know, that LZ got so hot till he couldn't come in. But to me, we had been out there a day or so looking for these guys before we found them. A recon was flying around or something, and something looked funny to the guys, and that's where they were. So we ended up going. We were on the way back to the base camp that morning, actually, but when they spotted this thing that looked suspicious, the choppers turned another direction, and we ended up on the ground for 30 minutes until, you know, whatever came in. But the fear of being there was tremendous. I mean, you know, we didn't know what were there, and we didn't know what to expect when we got on the ground. So when the battle got started, we started trying to get a perimeter made, you know, so we can get some support. And it was just tremendous. I mean, this was a 3-day battle of living hell. I mean, you know, my friends were dying, and I couldn't get to some of them. And, you know, you get to know guys, and then you see them 1 minute, and the next minute they're gone. So, like, it's tremendous. War is just pure hell. I mean, you know, but you watch my back, and I watch your back like we did in Ia Drang Valley, and we both may come home. So this is how some of us got back here.
Yeah.
Let me give you a little bit more numbers there. We came in with 16 helicopters on each one of our passes in from coming out of Playmate. And it was 14.3 miles, and that was about 15 minutes. The reason that everybody had that 30 minutes is because on our first flight of the day, I got airborne and the artillery prep wasn't in, and I orbited for 20 minutes. And that made me have to refuel between the fourth and the fifth lift in. We got our butt shot off on the fifth lift. That more shut down the landing zone for troop lifts, and that's when Freeman and I started doing carrying the ammo in and water and medical supplies and taking out wounded. But we had 16 helicopters when it started. After that fifth lift in, we had about 4 of them were shot up bad enough so they had to be grounded. We had a couple of people wounded. My crew chief shot through the throat, and I think there was 3 dead on the aircraft. Roger Bean, a young lieutenant, got a bullet went in the back of his helmet and came out the front. He had 14 stitches, and he later became a major general. So he was so friggin' hard-headed he could dodge a bullet around. So.
Let me ask this question. At the reunion there in D.C., what do y'all call the I Drang Valley? Is there a nickname for it? What do y'all call it?
X-Ray.
We call it the Valley of Death.
X-Ray, Valley of Death. What about you, Joe?
No nicknames, just X-Ray.
Just X-Ray.
Albany.
We named it the LZ.
LZ X-Ray.
All right. And Albany, you mentioned Albany, Joe. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because, you know, most people go by the movie We Were Soldiers, and that talked a lot about LZ X-Ray. But I've read, doing my research, that some people consider LZ Albany kind of the forgotten part of the I Drang Valley battle. Can you tell me a little bit about Albany?
Well, first of all, it's not forgotten. It's the second half of our book, We Were Soldiers Once and Young.
Yeah.
And, you know, you get through the LZ X-ray part, and you heave this sigh of relief that it's over. Only it ain't over. The 2nd of the 7th marches off toward a clearing called Albany and walk into an L-shaped hasty ambush by fresh North Vietnamese reserve troops who've been waiting for their shot at killing Americans, and boy, it came to them. And something like 155 American boys were killed in a matter of 6 hours time in that tall elephant grass. Another 130 wounded. Pretty much took out that battalion. Charlie Company of 2nd of the 7th started the day with 110 men, and the next morning had exactly 8 present and accounted for. The rest were dead or wounded and evacuated. Yep. So we're talking a horrific battle, and the details are in the book. The director of the movie, Randall Wallace, chose to tell only the story of Landing Zone X-Ray and stopped the movie there, which, you know, we thought was not exactly the right decision. We wanted something about what happened next, but it's his decision, and there was nothing we could do to change that.
Understood. Let's go over to 1-7. Are there any questions in the crowd?
How's it going, gentlemen? Staff Sergeant, working S3 operations over at 1-7. My question is, so the battle lasted 3 days long. How did you find time to regroup, maybe get some rest, and think about, you know, what's the next step for you? how did you find time for that, and like where did you find time? You know, did you get to sit down and take a breather, you know, get a quick shut eye or anything over those 3 days?
Nah, there was nobody doing any sleeping that I saw.
I know I didn't. We couldn't. You know, it was just attack going on day and night. I mean, you know, we didn't know when they were coming or whatever, but wasn't no sleep. When we got pulled out of X-ray, we were at a holding area to continue what they talking about the Albany. We were in a holding area waiting for them to come out of this one-day battle they were in. I had a best friend in Albany. I came in from Fort Devens with 9 months left on the 2-year draft and met Joe and them and trained with them a month and got on the ship and went to Vietnam. But I had a best friend that was in that battle in Albany, and he came in the X-ray right before Albany, and a guy while we were in the holding area, I got a chance to see him. Wait a minute, it was the second day in X-ray. He came, stood up over me, and they had a helicopter out here on the LZ. We had put wounded on the choppers, and he came, stood up over me like he was on the block or somewhere, and I snatched him down and told him, you know, you get shot, snipers are out here. And when he went into the battle at Albany, and I was in the holding area, when they came out of that battle, I went looking for him, and a guy cut me on the shoulder and said, man, I'm sorry to tell you, your best friend got shot between the eyes. And that just destroyed me, you know, having guys close, trained with them, and were in my regular unit in Fort Devens, and you know, they put me on orders to go join Joe and them, and we became a brotherhood on the ship. And the battle last 3 days with us, and the one-day battle with Albany, it was horrific, like Joe said.
One thing, this Bruce Crandall again. I urge each of you to take a look at Joe's and the General's book. At the front, look at those maps that are in there. It'll give you a sense of direction and time. And I got about 3 hours sleep in the cockpit because I thought we were going back in. I got my aircraft that were flyable. I got the second. The A company of the 2nd of the 7th, I loaded at about 6 o'clock for an attack back into X-ray, and the battlefield was getting hit too hard, and they made me stay where I was at. They didn't tell me why, but I found out later that the battle was going on pretty heavy, and so we didn't get A company in there till about 8 or 8:30, but. You slept in the cockpit if you had any time at all, and it was the guys on the ground didn't sleep.
No, we didn't get much sleep at all, none.
There was too many people trying to kill him.
That's a tough life, gentlemen. I couldn't imagine have been in that battle. Let's go over to see if we got anything on social media yet. Alright, there's a question for Colonel Moore. Obviously, Colonel Moore isn't here, but maybe you gentlemen can answer it. My question is for Colonel Moore. When you finally were able to get up the hill, what were you thinking on what happened to your soldiers? And what kind of leadership do you want to show your other officers? And did Sergeant Major really not want to use the M16 that all the other soldiers were using? So a 3-part question. Can you answer any of those?
Yeah. What the hell?
Yeah, I think he's talking from the movie, and the ending the battle by charging up that hill. That's total Hollywood bullshit. It never happened.
Tell him, Joe.
You know, Colonel Moore would have never bunched up the whole battalion, what was left, and sent them up that hill into the barrels of heavy machine guns. You know, only Hollywood could conceive crap like that.
Exactly. Just like when the movie first started, it started with action right away. But when we first landed in LZ X-Ray, it was quiet. They were up on that mountain watching us land. Then they started coming down to get us. It was quiet. But you know, in a movie, you got to start with action or something.
Yeah.
That was a lot of Hollywood in that movie.
That was action. That was just French.
Yeah. When they wiped out the French, 11 years later, here we came. And they were waiting for us.
That was a different battlefield. That was BS, and it. But the BS I liked was showed me with the gunships that I'd stolen, and evidently was doing a gun run.
Absolutely, doing a gun run with miniguns that were not on helicopters for another 18 months in Vietnam.
How about that?
Just amazing what Crandall was able to steal from the Air Force.
I had many guns on my second tour.
Okay, so speaking about Hollywood movies, let's talk about somebody who there should probably be a Hollywood movie about, and that's Second Lieutenant Rick Rescorla. Sorry if I messed that up. Can y'all tell me a little bit about him?
Rescorla was the real deal, true American hero. Hal Moore said that Rick Rescorla was the finest platoon leader that he ever saw operate, and he fought. His company was seconded to Colonel Moore in LZ X-Ray, and they took over the section of the perimeter that Charlie Company 1-7 had occupied before they got, 50% casualties and were pulled back. So Rescorla's company took that over and did a lot of good preparations. They had a little time and were able to stomp down the tall grass and put out booby traps and warning devices and dig their foxholes deep. And, their artillery guy registered the battlefield just absolutely classically. And sure enough, 3 o'clock in the morning, here comes 2 battalions of the enemy, and that company just laid waste to them. 3 or 4 times they attacked that section of the line, thinking it was just going to be what was left of Charlie Company and not the whole of Bravo Company 2nd of the 7th with Rescorla. They did a great job. And when we pulled out of X-Ray, they pulled out with us to rest and refit. But when the ambush got going in Albany, they alerted Rescorla and Diederik's company that they had to go back to their battalion in the middle of this fight in Albany. And so they saddled up and did a nighttime insertion in a hot landing zone. And the guys who were on the ground, who had been fighting all day and had seen some horrific action and taken terrible casualties, when they saw Rescorla and Diederik and those guys coming, it was just a breath of fresh air. And old Rescorla got off that chopper and he said, "Okay, boys, they got us surrounded. We can attack in any direction."
One of the things I'd like to talk a second about Rick Rescorla is later, because he was recognized by our Medal of Honor Society for our civilian helicopter, our civilian heroism award. It's equivalent to civilian Medal of Honor for what he did in the second tower. Rick's picture is on the front of the book, We Were Soldiers. He also wasn't scheduled to die in that battlefield. He died in the second tower, getting all the people out of there. And he did one hell of a job. The one thing that he was a British subject at that time in the Battle of the X-Ray and the Ia Drang. And he became an American citizen afterward and got a law degree. And he was the head of the security for
Morgan
Stanley. And he did just one hell of a job. The only thing I ever heard anyone say bad about Rick Rescorla is that he was one of the worst singers you could ever hear. You wanted to send him over to the enemy to punish him. It was a great. We honored him with our award, and he deserved it.
He saved 2,700 people lives down those stairs.
His life reads like a book. I mean, those are just small snippets of what he did, from fighting overseas before he even came into the American military, to Vietnam, to 9/11, and what he did and given his life. I mean, that is a movie I want to see, or a book I want to read. Let's go over to 17 and see if there's any more questions in the crowd. Sir, Major Williams, maybe you have a question. Sitting here, what's it feel like sitting here talking to these veterans and hearing their stories?
It's definitely an honor to be in the squadron and the regiment with its long history, and it's something you see every day with just the soldiers' actions, and then walking around our building with the pictures we have, really not only from the Vietnam era, but going all the way back to the late 1800s, early 1900s with the squadron. It's long history, and it's always appreciative to be able to talk with veterans and the men who have served in the unit in the past, and we appreciate a lot. We have a couple of soldiers who typically do come by every couple of months and talk with the younger soldiers. If anyone here has any comments about some of the other veterans or the people you might have talked about at the reunion, such as Coleman or Teeter, any thoughts on going to the reunion last April?
It's really awesome getting to know the older veteran, the older Gary Owen, and seeing the perspective of Gary Owen.
I believe you guys have my picture in there. I'm the reef layer.
What do y'all think about that? There's an actual conference room with those flags and colors in there, you know, and the history lives on through the soldiers of today from what y'all led, what y'all did.
It's amazing you got a picture of Eddie Times in there. Man, you got no taste at all.
We've been going at it like that for 50 years, man. Ain't nothing but love.
One comment. I think that the Cav that we have today is every bit as good, if not better, than what we had in my day. We had too many people who got a choice of go in the Army or go to jail in the old days. And usually most of them went to jail in one of our stockades. So today we've got some of the best people we've ever had, and I'd be proud to serve in your unit today.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. We appreciate it. But ultimately, y'all led the way for us, and we're just trying to carry on the history that y'all set forth.
Cool. Thank you.
Well, gentlemen, I think that's all the time we have. Is there anything y'all'd like to add or say?
Just keep on keeping on, and Gary Owen.
Up first.
Good job.
All right, gentlemen, thank you for your time. We'll let y'all get back to y'all's association reunion, and we appreciate your time. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.